Welcome /malicious compliance. Teacher hates senior skip day and tries to ruin fun. Group of troublemakers obey her instructions. So this is my first post here. Apologies if I don't get the formatting right. My dad and I were talking about our respective days in high school and he shared how he and his buddies got back at their grouchy old math teacher, Mrs. Schaffer. According to Dad, Mrs. Schaffer was the best teacher he had ever had, and he and his buddies gave her endless grief, including using the phone in the classroom to pull a prank on another one of their pals. However, she took things way too seriously. She was stern, strict and was the kind of person who could never take a joke. Everything had to be done exactly right. Of course, Dad and his buddies, being teenagers, saw her as someone who could use livening up and gained reputations as class clowns. He told me that Mrs. Schaffer probably thought he and his friends were going to be criminal masterminds or something. Every year at this high school, they'd have senior skip day, which every senior looked forward to because, hey, it's a day away from school. Mrs. Schaffer, in her grouchiness, detested senior skip day and decided to ruin everyone's fun during my dad's senior year. To this day, Dad swears that she picked that year because of the shenanigans he and his pals got into. She announced that there would be a test on this day. Not only that, but anyone who skipped the test because of senior skip day would get a 0, which would affect their grade average. Dad, who had a scholarship lined up at his dream school, was mad. If he missed the test, his grade average would be affected, risking his scholarship. However, he had been waiting every day for 4 years for senior skip day. So he and his buddies came up with a plan and give Mrs. Schaffer the most grief she had ever had in her entire life. Senior skip day rolls around. Dad and his buddies went to play golf early in the day, as their test was scheduled in the afternoon. Once they finished their game, they hurried to the school, not even bothering to change out of their golfing clothes. However, this became a big problem, one Dad admitted he and his friends didn't think of. For those who don't know anything about golf shoes have little cleats, spikes, on the soles to help grip on rough terrain. However, wearing them and walking on tile floors is a bad idea. One of them was smart and took off his cleats, but the rest of them were stubborn and insisted on trying to get to Mrs. Schaffer's room in their cleats, which was on the second floor and on the other side of the building. They were slipping, sliding around, grabbing the walls, and laughing so hard. Everyone poked their heads out of the classrooms and were confused at the sight of these 4 guys trying to walk to their classroom in their golf cleats. Somehow, they managed to get down the hallway and up the stairs without breaking their necks and made it to Mrs. Schaffer's room. There was now a new problem. While the hallways had tiles, the classrooms themselves had wood floors, which resulted in the cleats getting stuck. They were clomping around, making a racket trying to get to their desks. Everyone else in the classroom looked up and laughed so hard, everyone that is except Mrs. Schaffer. She was beet red and looking like she was going to drop dead of a heart attack at the sight of these 4 idiots, as my dad put it, clomping into the room, dressed for a round of golf, and laughing as if they had heard the best joke in the world. Mrs. Schaffer yelled, "What are you doing?" and pointed to the once perfect wooden floor, which now had holes in them. Dad, who had calmed down enough, shrugged his shoulders and said we had time between rounds of golf to take the test, so here we are. Mrs. Schaffer, realizing that they did show up to take the test as she told them, and that her own ploy to get back at them had backfired, calmly told them to take their seats and gave their tests to them, glowering at them the whole time. When they were done, they clomped back out before slipping and sliding around to catch their next tea time. At least Mrs. Schaffer was fair. Dad passed the test and kept his scholarship. To this day, those holes are still in the wooden floors. Edit, words and added context. Teacher here. Most of us don't really care about senior ditch day. We want the kids to have fun and stay safe, and we are just as excited about graduation as they are. What bothers us is when kids who aren't seniors or kids who are seniors, but who are in danger of not graduating, decide that they too will take a day off. Freshmen, sophomores and juniors, you haven't earned it yet. Why do you think you should get to do senior ditch day? Kid with a 40% in senior English. You have to pass the class. There's not much time yet. You can't afford to take the day off. I remember having perfect attendance from kindergarten to grade 12, which prompted me to ask all of my teachers if it was okay if they wouldn't mark me absent if I did skip the day. They all indicated that they would most likely let me, but none gave a straight answer, probably because they aren't allowed, so I ended up going as to not ruin the record. Reply. My school was the opposite. They found out the day and threatened to report anybody who skipped as truant to the police. And what did we end up doing that day in literally every class, since we had already had our final exams? Watch movies and generally waste our time. Anyway, the kids who were already 18 knew better, for the most part, since that doesn't apply to them. I was 18 and went, obviously, because I just thought it was kind of a silly thing and I actually really enjoyed my teachers and classmates that year. We had senior skip day, which was handled pretty normally, since it was late enough in the semester that it didn't affect anything. That would have been in the early to mid 1980s, when it was little different and high school seniors were expected to have their moments. It was all in good fun. However, me and 5 friends who had shared 5 of 7 classes a last semester thought we'd be super clever and decided to come back from college for a day and sit in all our common classes, sort of a reverse skip day. We checked with younger siblings to make sure that we'd get the same classes and teachers, even though the schedules and classrooms had changed some. We showed up at about 0815 for the first class, started at 0830, and ran into the principal on our way in. We chatted a bit, and he asked what we were doing on campus. We hemmed and hawed a bit, then fessed up to our plans. He laughed and told us not to interrupt the classes too much. We set off for the 0830 class, English Lit, and slipped in before Ms. G arrived, taking some empty seats at the back of the class. The rest of the class was confused, but rolled with it, with some giggling and strange looks. Ms. G showed up a little bit before the bell, and stopped at the door, an odd expression on her face. She walked slowly to her desk, making eye contact with each of us. "Good morning, Ms. G," we said in unison. "Well," she said, "good morning. Everyone take out your lit books and read pages 234 to 256. Except for you guys," she said, pointing to each of us. "You've got a pop quiz on Robert Browning." She proceeded to write 3 questions on the board and directed the 6 of us to get out pen and paper and start answering the questions. We weren't quite smart enough to have brought school supplies with us, so she asked our fellow students to provide us spares if possible. They gleefully complied. So we spent the next 45 minutes trying to remember whatever we were supposed to have learned about Robert Browning the previous year, while her class went on uninterrupted. We had put up a good battle, but been defeated by her quick wits. She was always one of my favorites. As far as I know, my last year of high school was also the last year they held prank day. The year before it, someone accidentally damaged a teacher's car with firecrackers, so on the year my batch was graduating, they warned us that they would be strictly watching the seniors that time around. Unfortunately, the week leading up to prank day, there were a few Facebook posts in the graduating group talking about raiding the school. I and probably a lot of other students didn't reply to it and just looked away because it sounded like a lot of trouble. The night before prank day, someone brought people from outside the school, possibly some from the batch that already graduated, cut the wires to the security cameras, then proceeded to spray graffiti all over the school walls. We came in with the typical relatively harmless water balloons and tissue rolls, but were almost immediately called into the gym to try and find out who the culprit was. No one stepped forward, and when I went to check the group again later that day, all the posts had been deleted already. Janitors had to paint over graffiti all the way on the second floor of some of the buildings, and by graduation day some traces of it were still a bit noticeable. Was a disaster, but the school was in the middle of a rebuild and most of the new buildings were behind tall fences anyway, so the old ones were probably taken down along with whatever was left of that. My high school did not allow senior ditch day. Instead they have several seniors only trips at the back end of the year, such as a several-day Disneyland trip, a day trip to California's Great America Amusement Park, and on ditch day itself they have a beach trip, If you don't go on the beach trip you had to go to class or have your parents call you out sick, otherwise there were repercussions. If I remember right, anyone with an unexcused absence on that day had to take their finals a week later than anyone who either went on the beach trip, went to class, or had an excused absence on that day. That was a big deal, because finals for seniors took place the week before the final week of class, which is when the freshmen, sophomore, and juniors take their finals. And seniors were allowed to just stay home during that last week, as long as they already took their finals. So basically you either go to the approved functions on ditch day, so you can leave school a week early, or you ditch that one day and have to stay an extra week at school. Seniors at my high school also had a senior prank every year. The year before me, the seniors decided to steal a few peacocks from the local peacock farm, southwestern Ohio, and a few chickens, and get all of these animals drunk, and then let them loose into the school at night, before everyone arrived in the morning. All hell broke loose in the morning. These drunk birds flocking around everywhere. 2 peacocks ended up dying from alcohol poisoning. The reason that these seniors were able to get into the school after hours was BC one of the kids was a superintendent's son. My school district is very uppity. It's not a private school, but it constantly ranks as one of the top schools in Ohio. The school was brand new at that time too. Everything was state of the art. Our gym was donated by PepsiCo and had a drop-down scoreboard. Our girls basketball team was awesome and won state 4 years in a row. Needless to say, this was very embarrassing for the superintendent and faculty. My dad was actually the assistant superintendent, not assistant 2, but the actual assistant superintendent. So anyway, all that ended up happening was the kids involved weren't allowed to walk at graduation, but they were allowed to be there and do everything else, which some people were pissed about. They also had to return the remaining birds that were alive and apologize to the farm owners, and they also had to pay to replace the dead birds. Peacocks are $5,000 a bird. That was the most surprising detail of this story to me. That group fucked it up for all future senior pranks though. I remember my graduating year, the seniors all parked perpendicularly in their parking spots instead of all parallel like normal. The school saw it happening on the cameras and went out and shut that shit down quick. I guess I get it. The year before was a huge scandal and was on TV and in the papers for what seemed like ever. That school was no stranger to scandal, but most just didn't make it into the public arenas. My dad being assistant superintendent and my mother also employed not only in the district but at my high school, which was super fun, lem tell ya, always had juicy stories they talked about to each other that I would listen in on. Lots of teacher on teacher fucking. A senior Spanish teacher ended up terminal cancer and the whole community raised money for him through cancer walks and all that. A few weeks after, that dude was arrested in a park in Cincinnati known for gay prostitution, and he got caught approaching an undercover officer posing as a male prostitute. The teacher was fired so quick we saw him 1 minute, and he was gone the next. I could probably write a book just on that school's scandals, just the years I attended. Totally insane. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.